Hello, everybody. So welcome to our June free webinar for June. It's not July yet. It's June.
Yeah.
We got the month right.
Right.
That's right. Last month I said June, and this is June. So this month's topic is about the benefits of being a PI. So this is good for anybody who owns a site, wants to own a site, works at a CRO, works at a sponsor. You're always trying to convince physicians either to recruit patients or to participate in research as a PI or as a sub-I, right? So these slides, which are very well done by Amy, I must say.
You reviewed them already?
These ones I did.
Oh, you did?
Yes. So, as always, anyone put your comments in the chat. And this replay will be available for anyone who registered, and it's also going to go on YouTube. So let's get right into it. Okay, the importance of principal investigators. So only 15% of doctors participate in research as PIs. Did you know this?
That even seems a little high to me.
But that seems high. But Amy, where are you getting your numbers from? But I think this is now this is physicians that have ever participated in a study.
Sure, so it could be academic. It could be during medical school. Yes,
because there's another alarming stat. 90%, and this is accurate, 90% of the doctors that do participate in their first study never participate in a second one. Why do you think that is, Chris Upper?
Well, it's their experience within the study, right? It's a lot more involved than they anticipated. Being that they're research naive, they probably make some errors that, to them, they were unaware would be errors, right?
Right.
Okay. They run into issues that were unanticipated, and they see it as more hassle than it's worth. I think if they were to do 2 or 3 studies, right, if they got beyond that first study and did a couple more, they would understand that that was just a learning curve, and now they're beyond that, and things would be run much more smoothly.
Mm-hmm. So why is it important to have more PIs involved in the industry? Because one of the things we do is we educate new sites, and they happen to be new PIs on, first of all, how to get those PIs to want to work with them in the first place, right?
Well, that right there is the main reason why I think they would want to have as many PIs as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because if 9 out of 10 are going to leave you, at least after the first study, then you're going to need additional PIs.
Right.
And that's not the only reason you want PIs. You want to be able to accommodate as many indications as possible. You don't want to, as the term goes, pigeonhole yourself into one specific arena, therapeutic area, because if that therapeutic area slows down, or there are a few studies in that area, what are you going to do for revenue?
Right.
It's best if you have a number of different specialists that you can work with and open yourself up to as many indications as possible.
And also from a perspective of patient recruitment.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So we need, oftentimes the best PIs, or the best way to recruit patients for your studies is getting them from the PI's database or the sub-I's database. So that's one of the ways to go about doing it, is PIs involved. So patients are more likely to enroll in a study if their PI is involved somehow, or if their doctor is involved, preferably as a PI, but it could be as a coordinator as well. Okay, different types of research. There are 2 types of research: academic and industry sponsored. You want to break that down, Chris?
Well, academic research, hosted at a hospital, university, or university hospital. The institution is funded by grants from the NIH. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, yes, a lot of the research is funded by NIH's academic units, but they will also acquire industry-sponsored research as well. I know a number of hospitals that do industry-sponsored research, but typically it's going to be NIH or even sponsor-initiated trials at a hospital.
Yeah, IITs
or university.
Investigator-initiated trials. So your doctor, your research-naive doctor, may be familiar with or understand or be thinking of the concept of academic research when you're approaching them, and you need to reframe their perspective and make them look at industry-sponsored research as actually very different from academic.
Well, in a number of ways, because the way payments are received, it's entirely different, right? Academic research typically will receive a grant, right, in which they get all their funding initially, or they'll get a quarterly funding or semi-annually, or however the contract's broken down. But it's not dependent upon enrollment. They will get a full amount of payment regardless of enrollment, whereas it's completely different in industry-sponsored research in which payments are generated by enrollment.
Another thing is in academic research or investigator-initiated research, the doctor, the PI, is the one writing the protocol, creating the protocol.
Sure.
In industry-sponsored research, they don't do that. There's almost no thinking involved from a PI's perspective. It's just patient safety
all
and
the rules.
Study oversight.
All the rules. You're not creating the rules as the PI. You're following the rules.
So you're not really researching in the academic sense of the term. You are implementing someone else's research.
Yep.
Right? That's the difference. A lot of doctors, a lot of you site owners, a lot of you CROs, a lot of you sponsors, when you approach a physician who's never done research before and you start talking about clinical research, their mind automatically goes to academic research because they remember it from their residency days.
Sure.
Right? But that's not, like 85% of the studies out there are industry sponsored. So you've got to reframe their thinking. They're not going to be creating the protocol. You don't actually need a lot of experience to effectively and safely execute an industry-sponsored trial.
Sure, you have all the rules and regulations right there in the protocol.
Everything's done for you.
Yeah, all the thinking,
The PI oversight can't be done for you.
No.
That's different. And that's really the focus of your conversation with your PI or your potential PI should be around the fact that they have to maintain PI oversight, but you are bringing some kind of value to them in the form of doing the work, like doing the coordinating, that's like 90% of the work. Okay.
Sure.
So here's the benefits of academic research. PIs hold publishing rights. It's a little more prestigious because it's funded by grants and not profit-driven. So you can argue this is pure scientific research, not necessarily something to generate revenue for me, even though it is. It's not entirely accurate, but it's the perception.
Yeah, I agree.
PIs have more control over protocol and study design. Now, the industry-sponsored research, 85% of research is industry-sponsored and is unaffected by NIH budget cuts. Okay, I know a lot of people are freaking out over that. I think it was last year. Industry-sponsored research is profit-driven. Can you explain to these people listening and watching what is meant by profit-driven?
Well,
sounds like a dirty word.
Well, no, it's not. I mean, all businesses they're concerned about profit, right? So profit-driven is, I would assume, what's meant here. I mean, it could be two different things, right? Profit-driven could be, and most likely what it means is the drug we're trying to develop, we want to, speaking for the sponsor, we want to make a profit off of it. So we're only going to pursue things that we see a course or an avenue to generate profit from, right? I mean, there are studies, but typically I don't think they're sponsor initiated, or at least not too often, for orphan diseases, right? because there's not a lot of profit to generate there, right? So there's not a lot of research done for these relatively rare diseases. If you have a disease in which affects 1 in a million people, there's really no profit to be had there. So the research they're going to be interested in conducting is something that affects a lot more people, so there's more profit there.
And what I mean by profit-driven is, ideally, this physician is already in an office, has a private practice, is monetizing the patients, just like any doctor in America does.
That was the other possibility.
Right. And now you're adding research to what they're already doing.
Sure.
So the same patients, not only can they be treated in the private practice, but they can also join appropriate trials when the opportunities are there. And that's another revenue stream for that doctor.
Exactly. So there's profit there for the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
They can enroll patients. They can make money doing research.
And this is what you've got to convince the physician on when you're trying to explain the benefits of doing research. I have a 2-minute video on this and animation on YouTube you can find. But just you have to understand these things so that you can effectively communicate them. And again, research is, at the end of the day, when you're in the industry-sponsored research and you own a company there, it's sales. Sales is the most important skill you can have, is to be a salesperson.
In almost all businesses.
Yeah, this one's no different. Okay, next slide. Why do physicians conduct research? To be on the cutting edge of new treatments and technologies. This is true. It's nice. It's a good thing to put on your CV. It's prestigious. Most importantly,
or at least
to them.
Sure.
Not to society,
right,
but to them.
Sure.
Is to supplement their income and add an additional revenue stream to their private practice. Okay? But here's the good news, everybody. You can do both.
Yeah.
They're both the same thing.
Well, I mean, just because you want to make money doesn't mean you can help doesn't mean you can't help somebody at the same time.
The study. We're not going to mention her name.
Mm-hmm.
She chose our study, even though it's a lower budget, because she really believes in the treatment.
Sure.
And she has patients that can immediately benefit from this.
Sure.
So that's an example of an industry-sponsored trial where the PI is actually not putting their bottom line as the main priority.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she can't lose money on this study either.
Right.
So the finances have to make sense. But she's doing this because it's going to benefit her patients.
Yep.
Right? So there's different reasons to do research, but they all tend to revolve around these two concepts.
The one thing I would add is, and you may have already said this, but with industry-sponsored research, it's not sexy.
Explain this.
So when you're doing academic research, or what was on the left-hand side of that previous slide, right, as far as helping patients and generating new therapies, and it's industry-sponsored research is not nearly that sexy. You're not defining anything from a scientific standpoint. You're just following rules. You're just collecting data. That's really all the PI is doing, collecting data. They're not designing any new compounds. They have nothing to do with the study itself. And a lot of PIs, they get involved thinking that this is kind of sexy, right?
Yeah.
And then they find out that's not the case. So it probably wouldn't hurt when propositioning a PI about doing research that they understand, like you had said, it's completely different from academic.
Reframe their...
Yeah, it's not sexy.
But how would they say that in a nicer way?
In a nicer way?
They can't just tell us.
Sure, it depends on your relationship with this person. Right?
It's not sophisticated.
Right.
It's not.
If when speaking with a PI and their understanding seems to imply that they think they're going to be part of this whole design scheme of the drug, you have to set them straight and let them know, no, unfortunately, that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Really, this is more about collecting data and getting paid quite well to do so. You have to take away one thing, right?
Right.
The not sexy,
Prestigious.
the prestige of being part of the design. You have to remove that, so that's a negative. But then you can add that there is very nice compensation involved in doing this.
And let's face it, physicians have egos for the most part. Nothing wrong with that, but some get carried away with it. But what they care about oftentimes is just impressing their colleagues too. So if they know that their colleagues don't do research and they do research, even if it's industry sponsored, they already know the perception of their colleagues is that this person's involved on protocols designing studies, and whoa, like we put him on a level. So it's already a win for them, even though it's not as that prestigious. Just by them being in the industry arena, it becomes that way amongst their peers, right? And this is not even discussing the financial aspects of the research.
There are some, and again, I'm not going to mention her name, but there are some doctors that are aware, who have never conducted research, but are aware of industry-sponsored trials, and it's not that prestigious to them, right?
Explain. Give a context.
So,
without mentioning names.
Sure. So there was a doctor that had aspirations of a political arena in the medical field.
Okay, I remember.
Yeah, that doing research. But she knew that would be frowned upon amongst her peers in this political arena. So first had to find out if she would be able to move forward with her aspirations, and if she were unable to, she would do research. As it turned out, she was able to move forward with her political aspirations and chose not to do research because it appeared it was a negative to her colleagues.
Because the appearance would be that she's receiving funds from pharma companies, and how could she be unbiased when she's getting her pockets lined with, even though it's not true, but because of the Sunshine Act, all these things are disclosed.
Sure.
So
nonetheless, a lot of her colleagues would have that opinion.
Right. So it works both ways, basically. Yeah. It always depends on what they're trying to get out of it. That's really one of the things you got to do when you're convincing a physician to be a researcher, is look at what they're trying to get out of it. Don't just look for what you need.
Yeah.
Nobody cares what you need.
Yeah, you need to give them something.
You have to give them everything.
What are they looking for? What do they want? You
have to give them almost everything, and then hopefully you have something that you can get out of it as well.
Sure.
Which you will, because it's called a PI. Mm-hmm. And you can't do research without a PI.
Yep.
And hopefully they have patients too. Okay, so the relationship between a PI's private practice and a research sites. Most PIs have their own private practice where they treat patients and bill insurance. Some of these patients will qualify for certain studies. Although a PI's private practice and a research site may operate within the same office, they should be treated as separate entities. The private practice and a research site should each be their own respective S Corp or LLC.
Yeah, just to protect yourself.
Yes, that's just the smart thing to do. Okay. Or any meeting. Okay. Roles and responsibilities. This is where the number one objection from PIs, from physicians that are research naive, is going to be, I just don't have the time. I don't want to lose my license. The last thing I want is a FDA audit. Mm-hmm. Sounds like a lot of paperwork. Sure. I'm not interested.
Yeah, me neither.
Those are the objections. So what do you tell them?
Well,
you have to educate them.
Sure, FDA audits are rare, and if we do our job right, even more so. And there's certain criteria, for the most part, that you can avoid. Okay, so one of the most, I think, there's a couple of things that occur that will bring on an FDA audit, right? For cause. So if somebody's complaining that you're committing fraud or endangering people, and somebody complains to the FDA with that information, you probably will get audited. And another reason oftentimes sites get audited is when they're in the top enroller for a study for a drug that looks promising. If you avoid those things, you do a good job on your data, and you're not typically the top enroller or ever the top enroller in a study, you probably are not going to get audited. It's not a guarantee, but most likely you will not.
Okay. So, how do you communicate this to the PI?
FDA
or to the physician?
FDA audits are rare, and if one should ever happen, that's why I'm here. I'm here to prevent any problems if an FDA audit should occur. That's the value I bring.
Now, we got a question. Keep your questions in the chat room going. We will answer them when we can. PA, which is physician assistant, but not PIs. Only MD, DO can be PI?
No, that's not true.
Not true academically, but practically it is true.
So the FDA does not have any requirements for who can be a PI. You can be a grade school dropout. As a matter of fact, I just said this earlier this morning. You can be a grade school dropout, right? You didn't complete 5th grade, and you can be a PI. Technically, you can be a PI, right?
Right.
The problem is the sponsor or CRO is not going to trust their compound or their drug with you, and have to argue that you are a good selection for a PI to the FDA, most likely.
Right. The FDA is going to want to know, why did you choose this person to be the PI for this site? Based on their qualifications, or there must have been some other reason.
Sure.
Sometimes the sponsors don't even want, the sponsors want a specific specialist as a PI because the FDA has these concerns.
So there's one nearby here in San Diego. There's a psychologist who's often a PI on studies. So it definitely happens. It's rare.
It's rare, but there's no regulations stating a PI has to be an MD or a DO. I interviewed someone a couple years ago who interned here. He was a PI. He was a master's degree student and was a PI on a clinical trial. It was a nutrition study at a college here.
Yeah, but good.
At Cal Baptist.
Good luck.
But that's not a real study. Sure. That's a university-sponsored study. It's not FDA regulated.
But industry-sponsored trials, again, that psychologist, he does them all the time.
He does them.
Good luck, though, being a research-naive individual and being appointed as PI. Good luck. Good luck getting a trial.
Yeah. You basically...
You need to have inroads with a specific sponsor or CRO in order to be a PI and not have a medical degree.
Now, who knows, a decade from now, 2 decades from now, if sponsors start allowing nurse practitioners to be PIs.
Yeah, I mean, surely may.
They might, and then somebody's going to set a new precedent, and then they're going to discover that may be cheaper than having physicians be the doctors.
I would even go so far as to say that wouldn't be a new precedent. I'm sure somewhere in the country an MP has been a PI.
Well, a new precedent consistently.
That's common. Okay.
That's like 99% of the cases.
Sure.
It might be.
Yeah, very well could be.
I mean, if you look at healthcare, the greater overall healthcare space in general, I read an article the other day on LinkedIn about how NPs are devaluing the role of a physician.
Sure.
Right? I mean, they're cheaper. They tend to work harder. What happens in every dynamic when you have somebody up and coming that's working harder and can almost do the same thing you can do? Do the same things you can do.
So I raise my hand and have a question.
Yeah, ask the question.
I'm asking you.
Oh.
Because you would know the answer to this, and probably our audience does too. I don't. Academically, what is the difference between the two, an MP and an MD? Is it just the MP never went to residency? Is that the only difference?
The NP never went to med school. They went to nurse practitioner school.
Is that essentially the same, though? Med school and nurse practitioner school?
They learn the same concepts, but in NP school, they're taught how to rely on the doctors. MD is more schooling, and there's a residency. NPs have to do residency too.
Oh, they do?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But I mean, look at overall healthcare in general. You'll be able to predict, if you want to predict clinical research, just look at healthcare in general. Okay. If you start seeing more NPs allowed to operate independently, many states do already. It's going to start spilling over into research.
Sure.
Because research cares about where the patients come from. And if NPs start seeing more patients, I'm not saying the role of the doctor is ever going to go away, but who knows?
And you have one other component there. I mean, what's industry-sponsored research it's a business, right? I mean,
yep.
the end goal is to make money off of what they're doing.
It's to get the drug approved, the diagnostic approved, the device approved.
And part of that is limiting expenses.
Yeah.
Any good business tries to limit expenses.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can pay an NP less than an MD.
Limit expenses while maintaining FDA standards.
Sure.
Right? Which are very vague.
Yes, they are.
I've got another question. I have a question. If a PI is working in a private practice, which is a different place of research than the research site, can the patient cross over between the sites? Yes. It's done all the time. Logistics, you just gotta work that out. But it happens a lot, like many times.
Now, of course, it's better if the research site is within that physician's clinic.
Yes.
But if for for reasons like room, there's just not enough room to house research, then of course it makes sense.
Yeah.
But for appearance purposes, especially at site selection visits, makes most sense. To have the research site within the clinic.
Unless you have a huge standalone clinic with a bunch of doctor oversight, there's some mega sites out there that can pull it off. For the most part, the smaller private practice with a research site built into it presents better at a SSV.
It does. Yep.
So yes, happens all the time. Okay, now this is where you gotta sell the physician, because they're gonna come at you with objections. I don't want to deal with the FDA, or okay, I want to get, and I have to deal with these monitors. This is their roles and responsibilities, okay? The PI is ultimately responsible for the overall conduct of the study. However, it does not mean that they have to do all of the work. Most of the work that goes into running a study will be delegated to the study coordinator and other research staff. This happens 99% of the time. The PI oversees the studies to ensure that GCP guidelines are met and that the protocol is being followed as accurately as possible. What it boils down to is PI oversight and patient safety.
Yep.
Which is very manageable in regards to time. Mm-hmm. When you're not the one doing the paperwork, you're just signing lab results. Mm-hmm. And you're meeting with monitors when they come for maybe 10 minutes. 30 minutes.
A little further than that, I would say, but yeah.
10 to 60 minutes.
I would say for an average trial, 10 patients enrolled, it probably takes an hour of the doctor's time a week.
An hour a week for an average size site.
Yep.
Yes. Okay, so you tell them that when they bring you their objections. Projected revenue for a research site. This is where you convince them on the financial side. Okay. Somebody called today, asked for a business plan because they're meeting with a doctor. Mm-hmm. Right? The doctor wants a business plan. This is something that should go in the business plan. Projections, right?
Yep.
On average, sites make about $1,000 per patient visit. It's now a little more than that. It's like $1,300.
I would agree.
Okay. Studies have roughly 10 visits per protocol. Again, very just back of the napkin math.
Yeah, there's a huge range here.
A wide range. Some studies only have 1 visit. Some studies have like 50 visits.
100. So we've seen studies that are for the subject's life. So who knows how many visits?
So take the average of 10 visits per protocol. Sponsors will contract cutting in and out, but bear with me. Sponsors will contract for about 10 patients. Given that all 10 patients complete the study, the site will gross roughly $100,000 from a single study. It should actually be more like $150,000.
I'd even say as high as $200,000 because there's fees also that you receive.
Anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 for an average, moderately enrolled study for your site. And most sites get 3 to 4 studies in their first year and maybe 6 to 8 in their second year. And then this is all outpatient studies. Inpatient studies have the potential to bring in even more revenue when you factor in the bed days.
Oh yeah, way more revenue.
Like a magnitude of maybe 5. Mm-hmm. So that should go in your business plan. Financial breakdown. Here's the expense side. That's the income side. Here's the expense side. They're going to care about this too. A research site can gross anywhere from $300,000 up to $1 million a year for a new site. I mean, there's some that gross way more than $1 million a year. This is the average.
I would say this is a moderate site.
This is the mom and pop site that you can create today. I mean, it's going to take you a year to get 300K, but you can do this today.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not like, and then $1 million a year is not the max for those sites either. You can have a site grossing a bunch of like 10 million. I know some sites that do like 30 million a year.
Yep.
Okay. But this is like the average. While research coordinators do 80% of the work in running the studies, their salary takes about 50 to 70,000 a year.
I'd say the range is more like 40 to 80.
Yeah, I would too.
A newer coordinator is not going to command any more than probably 40,000, maybe even less than that.
But again, these are just back of the napkin math.
I would say average is probably 55. The average salary nationwide, 55.
Mm-hmm. And if you're the one doing the coordinating work, you could pay yourself, and this is how you know what's fair. This is a fair salary for you to negotiate with the PI. So after expenses, the PIs could take home roughly $500,000 a year conducting research in addition to their income, if they own the site or if they negotiate 50% with the site owner.
Yeah, 500,000 pretty high.
That's on this one.
Yeah, on $1 million a year revenue, I mean, yeah,
it's on the high end. It says up to.
Yeah.
This is where, again, you got to be convinced the physician that there's something in it for them.
But if you want to leave expectations around reasonable, which I like to do, I would say 100,000 a year. 100,000 a year for no more than 4 hours of your time a week, doctor.
Yeah, that's very doable for most sites starting out.
Yeah, 100,000 a year, 4 hours of your time.
Once they start seeing this. And they start thinking, hey, and this is why I always say your first PI is going to leave you. Mm-hmm. Once they start seeing this, let's say they are doing 100,000 a year for 2 years. Mm-hmm. They're smart. They start thinking, well,
I can do this myself.
Yeah, I can do this myself. My colleague's doing this and makes $1 million a year. Mm-hmm. Because we know many doctors that do make $1 million a year just doing research.
Yep.
Why can't I do this and make, let's say, 400K?
Yep.
So then they start developing their own site. So as a site owner, you got to always be prepared for these things, which is why we always say, always be on the hunt for new physicians. Mm-hmm. Don't rely on your current physician unless they're family or something.
Or you have them locked in some other way.
Yeah, maybe they own the building with you.
Yeah, and you're a partner in the business and you have a no-compete clause, that kind of thing.
Wahaha. Evil laugh.
Yeah.
We speak from experience. Okay, the bottom line, conducting research. Not look at slides. For physicians to add an additional revenue stream as a PI in addition to treating patients in their private practice. Are there any questions? Do you have color commentary while people type questions? If not, we will wrap it up.
No, I mean, I think I've already said my 2 cents. Again, I like to keep expectations a little bit on the lower side, because if you promise a doctor they're going to make $300,000 a year doing something and they only make 65, they're going to be highly disappointed and they may not want to continue. They feel they've been misled. I think making sure that the pitfalls of research going in with the physician is helpful, because they're less likely to leave you if they're aware of things going in. One of those pitfalls would be the payments. If you negotiated with your PI that they're going to receive a percentage of the budget, your PI needs to understand that payments do not occur regularly. They get paid when you get paid, and your payments may come in once every 4 months, once every 6 months. You may not get paid for quite a while when the study starts. When a study starts, you're probably looking at, from the day you open your door to a particular trial, you're probably looking at 4 to 6 months until you receive any revenue. So payments are slow. But once it's a snowball, once it gets rolling, the payments are always coming in.
Yep. Thank you. So replay will be available to anyone that registered. If you're listening on the podcast, text me 949-415-6256 and I can get you the YouTube video. This will go up on YouTube as well. Or you can just go to youtube.com/dansfarah and get it. Thank you, Chris. Catch you all next month. Take care.
Bye-bye.